Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where yesterday we were looking at the NASDAQ down hard and the Dow higher. Today, the Dow is down hard and the NASDAQ's higher. And I bet you can't guess which stock is doing it. Well, if you don't know, you haven't been watching. So stay tuned for the Rebel Edge with Pete and Jon. Bang! Well, Pete, I'm back in the Big Apple, by the way.
You love that Big Apple, man. I mean, I'll tell you, you know who loves Jon Najarian? Whoever the hell airline you travel on thinks you're the greatest thing ever.
Oh, well, yeah, it was planes, trains, and automobiles yesterday, though, Pete.
Yeah.
Because you had the jet, Dick. So I was sitting there down in Puerto Rico, supposed to be flying on United. And my daughter was supposed to be flying on United Sunday night. Her flight didn't go Sunday night because the pilots timed out. Imagine that.
Great.
And so they left the plane on the ground there, and she got my seat basically because the plane only goes Newark, San Juan, just back and forth. And so when it was stuck there, there's no plane to take me.
Great.
So I had to switch over to Delta, got into JFK, which is freaking a real picnic. Took you like 45 minutes to get out of the airport. I just feel so bad for the New Yorkers, Pete. I know eventually, 20 or 30 years from now, they'll get this figured out. But by then, we'll all have vertical lift cars and all that kind of stuff. But right now, literally, Pete, I am not kidding you. From the time I got in the Uber at JFK till when I got into Manhattan, it was 2-hour ride.
Oh, God.
2 hours. And
Great.
the first 45 minutes were just getting out of the effing airport. So you got that going for you.
Yeah, that's pleasant.
So think of that whenever you're zipping back and forth in the jet up to Minnesota. And I'm sitting there going, gee, be nice to have half of the jet that I've got.
A man's got to do what a man's got to do.
Yeah, apparently. But anyway, the reason, of course, that the market is down today, Pete, for the Dow is the Dow doesn't have Nvidia in it. It's a matter of time before they put it in there. They've put everything else in there that's not an industrial. Why not throw Nvidia in there, Pete?
I think you're right about that. I mean, if you want to know why were we down yesterday in the NASDAQ? Well, because all the semiconductors were down, right? Especially Nvidia, but you look that way. Why is everything up today? Well, on the NASDAQ side, well, because Nvidia is higher, Qualcomm's higher. Just go through the list of semiconductors, throw in a couple of technology names here and there, and the next thing you know, hey, you got a heck of a day for the NASDAQ.
Yep. Well, it is a heck of a day for the NASDAQ. It's higher by 199 points or so.
Oh,
and the Dow, meanwhile, down 300.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's talk about macro, Pete. It's still what you and Mark talked about yesterday. It's still the PCE, which comes our way on Friday. But I'll say, and I'll add in the VIX, and I'll say that ahead of the presidential debate, I think we'll see a little more volatility, Pete. That's not a right versus left comment. That's just, hey, something could happen in that debate to where they decide they got to replace one of those guys. And if that's the case, everything changes. Yeah. And I would say that's volatility. So that's my macro, Pete.
I like it. I like it a lot. I would say that you're right. We did talk PCE. We all know that's going to be a factor. Jeff Cox, a good friend of ours from over there at CNBC, wonderful guy, does a great job of writing and all the things that he does over there. One of the things that I picked up on, Jon, was this: the Fed Governor Michelle Bowman, right? So what did she have to say today? Here's what she said, Jon. She said, we're really not ready to cut. In fact, I'm open to the idea of raising rates. Now, how many people have said that? That's something I think has a lot of folks going, hey, whoa. I thought we were going to cut at least once this year. But obviously, it all does come down to, does inflation move in the right direction for them to be able to do that? And if so, then they will. But it's interesting just to hear her even using that phrase, John, to say, you know what? We may actually have to raise rates. That would shock the markets, I think, a little.
Oh, yeah. So now we've got 3 bits of information there, folks. Potential removal of a candidate, depending how that candidate does in the debates. 2, the idea that we've got this PCE coming our way on Friday. And 3, a Fed governor talking about, maybe it's time to push those rates up instead of down. I don't think they're going to fall in line with that one, Pete, but the first 2 are definitely why we went over 14 for the VIX yesterday, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to say Bitcoin making a couple percent return after trading below 60 yesterday. That's going to be my fantastic future today, Pete.
Yeah, I like that one. And I'll just say real quick, John, reduced cotton demand globally is something that has really gotten to be pretty daggone interesting, John. If you go back to 2022, the price of cotton was at $145. You know where it is now? $74. So it gives you a little bit of an idea. Now it's off of the lows. It's made a little bit of a move today, but I tell you what, when you take a look and you go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you see where cotton's been, boy, there's a very interesting read-through for that in terms of the economy. And it certainly does show that people are getting strapped and not all the spending has all been as good as some people are trying to put out there.
Yep. Well, we'll hear a lot about that 2 days from now for sure, Pete, on the 27th, Thursday, in those debates. All right. Let's talk about Novo Nordisk. Now, most of you know that these guys are the parent company of Ozempic, and Ozempic made them the most valuable company in all of Europe. So apparently people'd rather be skinny than have an Hermes or Louis Vuitton or Christian Dior bags. Because LVMH was the company that used to be the most valuable company in Europe. They're not anymore. And now you've got Novo Nordisk out there going to invest $4 billion, Pete, in North Carolina. That's also some pretty big news, isn't it?
I think it's huge. And you're right, $4.1 billion going into North Carolina. They're going to add 1.4 million additional square feet as well, John, with this. So this is a big deal. And I think a lot of this is really the roadmap for this. All you've got to do is say, all right, well, what's really gotten so big for us? And you just brought it up. The weight loss drugs, the diabetes drugs, that whole world has certainly been something that we've been talking about more and more and more. And, you know, whether it's pharmaceutical or biotech, however you want to phrase it, because it's all over the place. Everybody sees it. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to put something out there. And right now, Novo Nordisk is at the top, and they are making a huge move. Now, this process is going to take years to occur, but it just shows you that as they're looking out in time, they think people are definitely going to continue to go to Culver's, In-N-Out Burger, Taco Bell, and everything else. And, you know, it's going to be really interesting, but it certainly is giving the stock another nice lift up about 4% today.
Yeah, and we had some unusual in there, Pete. Unusual activity there. You see it at the bottom of your screen, folks, 2 of them. And what I'll note for you is the bottom one, which occurred a couple weeks ago. The other one is just today. The top one is today. But the bottom one, that's December 200 calls. That's a pretty big jump from 143. So somebody's out there betting that maybe we see close to 200 between now and December, Pete, 3rd week in December. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Indeed.
All right. Nvidia, high flying stock. We already talked about it at the top of the show. They had lost $500 billion in market cap just in 3 sessions, Pete. That's a pretty big drop. Well, they fell behind Apple as well as Microsoft during that. And one thing that I'd like to point out to folks, because I'll be on with Charles Payne, Pete, later today at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Actually, 2:45 is when I'll be on. But one of the things that I thought was noteworthy was when people buy puts in here, which has been very rare as hen's teeth, our mom might say, because she was a farm gal, and hens, of course, don't have teeth. So rare as hen's teeth. We had unusual activity in this one. And the unusual activity is in several hits of puts. The last time they bought them, Pete, the stock was 133, and that was the 17th of June. Well, they stepped in yesterday, and on that big dip, they said, you know what? I'm going to buy a cheap put for $1 and see if maybe by August, the 2nd of August, we don't see another swoon to the downside. And if we do, this harbinger, the rare put buying in there, could be a read-through, Pete. What do you think?
Well, the interesting thing, John, is this. So when it split, it got to about $120 a share, right? And then it got all the way up to 140 on Thursday, and everybody's shocked that there's some sort of a pullback. I mean, that was a tremendous move. And if you factor in the 10-1 and all of the rest of that and splits and everything else, that was an amazing move to the upside. All that being said, I look at the company, John, they've got unbelievable growth. We all know that. They've got incredible amounts of cash flow. We all know that. The cash to debt is monstrous, 20 billion monstrous. So all of that's factual. The one thing that I sometimes do get concerned about, though, and you and I talk about this a lot, is the price to earnings, the PE of a company. You look at Nvidia, it's been higher for sure. We've seen PEs in the 70s. We've also seen it drop all the way down into the 30s. And right now, it's a little bit closer on the PE side, John. Call it 45 to 50, somewhere in there. So is it maybe a little in front of itself? Could it give back something maybe over time? I think the answer is it sure could if somebody gets a little bit nervous and wants to shift around a little bit. But if you think this one's on fire and a little bit stretched, take a look at something like an SMCI or whatever that's only up threefold this year. It's had a pretty decent year as well. So just know that these things are going to be very volatile. Maybe the markets themselves haven't been as volatile, but these names, I think a lot of these semiconductor names are going to continue to be volatile as we go through the year.
Yeah. And these guys, Pete, when you're selling a chip for $40,000 and you can't even get your supply chain to make enough of them,
it's not a bad problem.
Yeah, you got a pretty good problem. That's what's known as a happy problem.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk, Pete, just for a moment, because as I've said, we have the presidential debates in front of us. We've got DJT, which is basically Donald Trump's Truth Social. And he had a tough couple of weeks where the stock dropped back down into the teens. But it's been climbing since then, Pete. And I'm thinking that the reason it was up 11% earlier today was because the debates themselves will focus more energy, at least, and perhaps people, onto what he's doing with Truth Social. So, the 16th of June, the stock was $26. Today it went shooting way up. Would you take a shot on this one, or is this one just it's too driven by news and or what might happen in the debates?
It's all about the debate, I would think, John. I mean, it just makes total sense. You got the chart right there in front of us. We see where the lows were, and we see where we've spiked back up to. This is a stock that's kind of been all over the map. I mean, it's been as high as close to $80, and closing on that day in the 60s. But nonetheless, it's had an incredible run. I mean, an incredible run from the highs to the lows, and then nice spike recently. And I think this is directly having to do with what we're going to see when it comes time to see what happens within the debates themselves. And to your point, maybe some reductions on who's in there. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that can come into play on this whole thing. But we're talking about a $6 billion market cap company here in terms of everything that we're looking at. There are some shorts in there as well. and it's made a pretty healthy spike from 25 to call it 33. I would expect this one. We were just talking about the semiconductors being volatile. You talked about the VIX right at the top of the show. There's a lot of reasons why I think we're starting to see a little bit more volatility from those 12s. And we were talking about how tight that range was for the volatility index, the VIX. Well, it's starting to expand, and I think that expansion's not quite done yet. We might see a lot more this week if there's some fireworks that happen as we get a little deeper.
Yeah, and I'll point out, folks, that the volume of trade in this stock, Trump Media and Technology, DJT, is through the roof on the call side, Pete. I mean, there is speculative buying at the 34 strike, which is more or less the at the money right now. There's speculative buying up to the 45, where there's like 10,000 of them trading. The 40s, where there's like 8,000 of them trading. And Pete, these are the weeklies.
Yeah.
So this is becoming quite the little option trader this one has. And the volatility of these, we're talking 200% volatility. So just to put it out there, folks.
Yeah.
All right. CCL, Carnival Cruise Lines. They reported results ahead of analysts' expectations. Revenue up nearly 18% year on year to $5.78 billion. Remember back in the day, Pete, during the pandemic, when they thought maybe nobody was going to ever sail again because of, rotavirus and, perhaps being in enclosed spaces with people that might have some sort of communicable issue. Well, apparently people are back on the high seas again. And take a look at this unusual activity, folks, because yes, we had unusual activity in CCL. There you see it yesterday when the stock was $16.29. Today, the stock trades, let me see what the high of the day is right now, Pete. So far, the high of the day is like $18. So a very nice, strong move to the upside. Actually, during the regular session, it was 1776. A very patriotic number, right, Pete?
Absolutely. Well, and you hit the nail on the head, John. You talked about everybody was just completely gave up on cruise ships. No one's ever going to go again. Those are always interesting times. Now, you never know when the turn will happen, but certainly the turn has happened. You talked about the revenue. How about this? Gross margins were 47. Now they're 50%. I mean, they raised their full year guidance to extreme levels. Their profit was an actual profit this time of 11 cents. A year ago, I think they lost 2 or 3 cents or 31 cents. They were looking for a loss of 2 cents on this quarter, and they crushed it. So they're basically knocked it out of the park in almost every way that you could. And it makes sense that the stock's up 6, 7, 8%, whatever it might be right now. But I'll tell you what, this is the highest levels that it's been this year, going all the way back to early January. So they're in the right spot, and it's not just them. You're getting dragged along. You're seeing Norwegian, you're seeing Royal. All of them are in very strong positive territory right now.
Yep. And another reason, folks, to be a subscriber to Market Rebellion, because, again, you've heard us talk about 3 stocks today that had unusual activity. You want to get in on some of that? Go to marketrebellion.com. You can see all of our educational offerings as well as subscriptions at marketrebellion.com. All right, Pete, I thought you'd like this guy because even though he's a guy that looks like a guy that Pete didn't like, that played for the Vikings, but this guy played for the Rams for a lot of years. But the video is not about him. It's him talking about Luke. And Pete and I got to meet him, got to see him down when he was playing for the only team he ever played for, the Carolina Panthers. And he was a hell of a ball player, Pete. Luke Keeley. So let's listen to what the big man had to say about Luke.
I'll never forget last year playing him and him literally calling out like 40% of our plays as we broke the huddle and just being like, how in the world is that possible?
Hey, Thomas, you fool it!
Probably one of the best linebackers ever, and nobody talks about him. These guys are talking about him, but honestly.
I mean, all due respect to Ray Lewis and to Pete, my brother, but this guy is one of the best to ever put on pads. Just an incredibly fast had a motor that never stopped.
Constantly watching film.
He was playing like that in the third and fourth quarter, not just the first
before they do it.
As soon as
plays
the
of the game.
quarterback says
That guy,
Luke is shooting a gap, and
when
he
you
knows
have this
where the
many
ball's
people
going.
giving you that kind of respect, saying this guy knew where the plays were going.
Smell out of screen,
very
smell out of
impressive.
draw.
Yeah, I think that's the most impressive part is just the time and effort that the guy put into it, John. And it all started probably in high school. Didn't know anything about him in high school, but from Cincinnati. That is the birthplace of high school football, by the way. Moeller, as everybody knows, one of the greatest high schools ever for football. But then he goes off to Boston College, sets all kinds of records there. He's absolutely incredible. Then he goes to the Carolina Panthers. John, I think he was the 8th or 9th pick in the draft. So first rounder, 6'3", 240 pounds. But it wasn't just about the athleticism that he had. It was his willingness to watch the film, know everything about everybody he's playing against. And then he had to call it up and shorten his career 8 years because he was getting concerned about what's going on with the head and, some of the injuries and all that the stuff that goes with it. But this is a guy who's going to be eligible for the Hall of Fame next year, 2025. And if he doesn't walk right into there, John, I don't know who deserves it anymore. I mean, I love Ray Lewis. I still think he's one of the best ever to play. You start watching more film on Luke Keeley and you just go, who's better? Who's better? I mean, honestly, you look at all the names of linebackers through all these years, and it's really, really tough. Now, he's not an outside linebacker like Lawrence Taylor. He's an inside linebacker. But in terms of that position, I don't know, John. How about this? He was the youngest defensive player ever to be the defensive player of the year, and he was the defensive rookie of the year as well. So you start adding up all the accolades that this guy and all the records that he set, a couple of Super Bowls, everything else, went to a terrible team, and they turned it around. I mean, he's a special guy. He only had 1,100 tackles in his career. So it seems like he probably did something right, I would say, along the way too, John. So
that's an
amazing,
incredible career.
amazing.
And hopefully he has an incredible life ahead of him, Pete.
Yeah.
Because he tried to ensure that, like Pete said, folks, by cutting his career short, not because of big injuries to his knees or elbows. They may have been there, but mainly because, he didn't want to get the CTE that so many players get from too many hits. So I think a smart move. All right. Well, what do you got on the calendar here, Pete, for Stanley Cup and so forth? Lord
John,
Stanley.
I got to figure this now. I haven't seen the ratings yet. I'm not sure exactly if they're out. There was obviously the game was last night, but it's the best two words in all of sports, which is Game 7. And that's what they had. And it was just the NHL. Now, there was some soccer going on, some of the Olympic trials, which, we had all the TVs on, John. I was down at Castro's with all the boys. We had a couple of hockey guys in there from the Wild. We had this, that, and the other. It was really a lot of fun. Some guys from the Wolves. But just to watch this game and Connor McDavid and how good that guy is on the losing team, and yet he's the MVP, it was well-deserved. I mean, when you really look at it and you say, well, how do you give it to the guy who comes from the team that lost? And my rebuttal would be, that's the reason why. He's the reason why. Now, it's a team sport. We know that. But Connor McDavid is special. How about this, John? He's the 6th player ever in the history of the NHL to be on the losing team and yet get the award for the MVP. He had 42 points in the postseason play. I mean, there's guys that play all year, all those 80-some-odd games, who don't get that kind of numbers, and he did that just in the playoffs itself. He had 34 assists in the postseason. I mean, the guy is a guy that everybody kind of pulls for because he's athletic, he's a good guy, he's part of a team, and he's never, ever won the trophy. And now another year goes by, he didn't win it again. But I'll tell you what, he deserved that award. I don't know how it's tough because it's got to be brutal. Matter of fact, he didn't come out to get it, John, when they announced it. He had to wait a while in the locker room to try to get himself together and everything else because he was so disappointed that they didn't win the game. But I thought that the only way the game could have been better, it was 3-3. 3 wins, 3 losses. You get there, you're in game 7. I was hoping we'd maybe get a tie just to put it into overtime, just to make it that much better. We didn't get that, but it was damn close because McDavid and those guys, let me tell you, they were in the Florida end, it seemed like, for 3/4 of the time in all 3 periods. I mean, it just full domination, but you know what? The goalie stepped up, the team stepped up. They got the goals that they needed, and they won it 2-1. So congratulations to the state of hockey, which is not Minnesota. It's Florida, folks. That's where all the awards are going. Tampa and Miami, that's where all the Stanley Cups are starting to stack up down there.
Yeah, well, so congratulations to our friend, Vinny Viola, the owner of the Florida Panthers, a good friend of Pete's and mine. And congratulations, Vinny. I did have a soft spot in my heart for Edmonton, and I'm sure he'll hate to hear that, Pete. But, Canada hadn't won it in so long, Pete. No Canadian team had as close a shot at getting it as the Oilers for decades. And now it's back down there in Florida. And, you know what? I think, was it McDavid, Pete, who was wearing the Kobe Bryant shirt under his suit? So he had the Kobe Bryant picture of Kobe and everything, and then he had his suit over it. And they came back from that 0-3 deficit to tie at 3-3, but they just didn't have enough. Like you said, the goalie played out of his mind for Florida.
Yeah. So
congratulations there. Well, what else do you have, Pete?
How about the College World Series? Now, it's kind of fun, John. We finally wrapped that up as well. I mean, we're closing down a lot of different things, but Tennessee finally does it. Now, Tennessee's been there before. They've been in the College World Series. John, how about this for an unbelievable crowd that was in Omaha, Nebraska, where it's always held? Peyton Manning was there for the College World Series, former quarterback. Everybody knows Peyton Manning. Josh Heupel, the football coach, was there. Rick Barnes, the basketball coach, was there. Everybody has heard of Pat Summitt over all these years. They're in spirit type of a thing. But they got a guy who's a pitcher there, John, who's a lot of fun. And it just shows, I mean, these baseball guys, kind of like hockey guys, it seems like they have a little bit more fun on and off the field than I think some of the other sports. And so Kirby Connell, a.k.a. Volley Fingers, but Vol, Tennessee Vols.
Yep.
He's got the mustache that's curled around like this and the whole thing. I mean, it's just absolutely classic. I mean, it's phenomenal. These guys had a great time, and now they're a baseball school because they've done it in football. They've done it in baseball. Their basketball team's been unbelievable. The women's basketball team is outrageously good, always has been ever since Pat Summitt started that whole tradition there. And it's just pretty cool to see all that orange, man. They were going crazy. It's exciting. And now the season's over, but not until Tennessee was able to grab their cup, their Stanley Cup, which is the title. And it's unbelievable and exciting, I think, for Tennessee and all those guys. But how ironic is it, John? How many times have we heard Peyton Manning over the years screaming, Omaha, Omaha? And they just came to the College World Series in Omaha.
Yeah, well, and honestly, we got to talk maybe tomorrow, Pete, about what the ratings were for that.
Yeah.
Because I got to believe they were high. I did a quick check on the hockey, Pete. Now, we don't have the finals, but game 2 of the finals, the ratings were up 46%. So I think 3.5 million people watching. And I remember, Pete, when they used to give away hockey on TV, give it away. So this is a big turnaround. And obviously Edmonton, not a huge market. That's not a huge market. But they nonetheless, with that huge comeback, I got to believe a couple of those games like 5, 6, and 7 were probably even bigger than the 3.45 million that they got, just because, people that weren't even all that interested in hockey all of a sudden started watching it, sort of like the Caitlin thing, the effect of people love watching a winner, Pete. That's still true.
Yep. No doubt about it. And it's, you're right, but I think a lot of people did fall in love with hockey, at least at that level, at the championship level, and it's all there. And, it's just amazing when they finally get to the Stanley Cup. It's just, it's a cool thing to watch. And you can see the passion in the players as they're out there, and the disappointment as well as the exhilaration that these guys get. I mean, you get all sides of that whole thing. And it was a tough loss for Edmonton because, they were knocking them down and taking them and knocking them down, and they got that 3 in a row. They just couldn't get that fourth one.
Yep, that is tough to have to win 4. If they hadn't have dug the hole that deep, they might have won it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, folks. It's Tuesday, and as you know, as we've highlighted, we have a PCE, which is pretty big for the Fed on Friday. And we've got a big debate on Thursday. So look for some volatility Friday, and we'll be covering it ahead of that right back here tomorrow and Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Rebels Edge. Have a great one.